Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's time for Alaska weather, and thanks for joining us again tonight on this March the 26th. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information at 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line, of course. You can always find our information online at weather.gov/Alaska or on social media. Use Facebook and type in NWS Anchorage, NWS Fairbanks, or NWS Juneau, and you'll find our local pages as well as NWS Alaska that represents the entire statewide coverage that you've been used to for so many years. If you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime. I'm happy to serve you any way I can. david.snider@noaa.gov is an easy way to find me online. Now, coming up, it's that time of the year. It is Tsunami Preparedness Week around Alaska, where we practice and remind ourselves what do we do in case of an actual tsunami event. In this case, the Kenai Peninsula Borough is testing their system tomorrow, Wednesday, at around 10:30 in the morning. Just remember to chill. It is a drill, but it is a really good time to go through the procedures and things you would do if you got a real alert if you're in the Kenai Peninsula Borough. So for communities like Homer, Nanwalek, Port Graham, Seldovia, Seward, you're probably going to hear sirens and get an audio message that sounds exactly like a real warning stating that there is a tsunami approaching. But just remember, it is a test, and residents who signed up with KPB alerts and who are in or near a tsunami inundation area will also receive a tsunami warning test message on their registered home or cellular device. If you haven't signed up through KPB alerts and you're in the Kenai Peninsula Borough, make sure you visit alerts.kpb.us and sign up before tomorrow morning on March 27th. So just remember, it's not a real emergency tomorrow. Don't evacuate your home. Don't call 911. On tomorrow, March 27th, chill. It is a drill, and it's expected that this is going to happen sometime around 10:30, but only for the Kenai Peninsula Borough. It is not a statewide test and not coming from the National Weather Service tomorrow. Remember, make sure you practice anytime. It's always a good idea to review that. And as an added bonus, the National Tsunami Warning Center would love for me to tell you that there is an open house on Saturday in Palmer. So if you're in the area in South Central, make sure you check that out. You can find more details there and check in on the event on Facebook or on the tsunami.gov site. Let's take a look at what's going on across the rest of the region now. Winter weather advisories are posted for the region across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, and winter storm warning continues for areas around Ambler and the upper Koyukuk Valley. The good news is a lot of this is settling down. Look for conditions to improve after another inch or so of snow tonight. Most of that will be gone by tomorrow morning. Out across the west, though, we are watching the chance for some high surf, and as we go from Hooper Bay northward all the way through Norton Sound, Golovin to Nome, and then up into the Bering Strait, we are watching for the potential for about 2 to 4 feet above the normal high tide line from about 6 o'clock tonight through about 6 a.m. tomorrow morning before conditions should subside. We have a pretty healthy west and southwesterly flow that's pushing water north and east, and we don't expect a lot of problems. There may be some minor erosion where you are, and if you do see some problems, we'd love to know about it because it helps us understand exactly what this type of weather does in your community, and we can't know that unless you let us know. So thank you for your reports as always. But that southwesterly flow is expected to continue as we head through the afternoon, the evening, and the overnight hours, and then it should subside. Here's a look at the bigger picture here. This is a satellite picture across Alaska, and you look out west and you can see a very large area of low pressure here across the eastern part of Asia, just west of the Gulf of Anadyr. This is keeping that southwesterly flow pointed right at places like Norton Sound, the Yukon Delta, the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula, and out around St. Lawrence Island as well. That's where some of the conditions may be a little bit more favorable for some smaller water rises. The other side of this is that moisture is moving into western parts of Alaska, but the problem is a lot of this is moving very quickly from south to north. On the eastern side of this, conditions are considerably drier, and we're leaving a lot of precipitation, if any, on the north side of the Alaska Range. South of that, the sun is mostly out, and that includes areas around southeast as well, where conditions are a little more gusty around Juneau and Gustavus. You've seen gusts there around, I believe, 20 to 25 miles per hour. Not a terribly strong wind, but certainly one that's pushed temperatures into the upper 50s by early afternoon. Places like Craig and Klawock are also fairly mild at this time. High pressure is in charge of the western Yukon as well as the central and eastern interior, and that is holding back a frontal boundary across the western interior. High pressure sitting south of the Alaska Peninsula at 1,028 millibars is working to limit how much cold air can actually make it in place right now, as it's really stabilizing the atmosphere and keeping any cold air from wrapping in from low pressure across the west or the eastern parts of Asia at this point. Things are pretty dry out here across the western Bering, but a little bit breezy, and that southwesterly flow once again is what's bringing water potential into northern sections of the Yukon Delta, the Norton Sound region, the Seward Peninsula, and out around St. Lawrence Island. Don't expect a whole lot of problems in a lot of places, but one thing you will notice is that the air will be slowing down across parts of south central, Kodiak, southeast, and the Copper River Valley. In fact, so much so that you might see some patchy fog over the next couple of nights under high pressure. North of the Alaska Range, there's still a chance that we'll get some of this disturbed weather to move through the interior, and it may still be warm enough tonight that there could be some pockets of rain and snow in the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley. North of that, it still wants to be winter along the Brooks Range, and again, we still have those winter weather advisories and warnings out for right now, but it looks like that should start to tame down quite a bit. The southwest flow will push water closer to the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula, and St. Lawrence Island, and north of that, where we have our crossed arrows, that means blowing snow, and there could be some restrictions on visibility and generally safe travel in those areas for some time, but probably not long enough that you'll get a warning from the National Weather Service. Colder air is trying to mass again across eastern Asia, and as that swings eastward Wednesday night, it doesn't look like it's going to make a very fast advance at all to the northwest coast of Alaska. High pressure still in charge of the interior and across the northern Gulf Coast. We'll see a trough of low pressure across southeast and very close to Cook Inlet and Kodiak Island. In those areas, the winds may come up just a little bit, but I would expect more of a trouble for perhaps parts of southeast with that, with draining a little bit of the wind out of the interior. High pressure sitting across the middle Yukon Valley at 1,028 millibars will steer precipitation up the west coast, over the Brooks Range, and then once again across the northern parts of the Alcan border. Precipitation generally should be light, as most of the storm energy is well to the north and to the west at this point. You can look out west and see another disturbance here crossing the Bering. That too will be fairly ragged and dry. And then further west, you'll notice a chance for rain mixing with snow as the next Bering Sea low develops across the north and western Pacific and moves into the Bering Sea as we go into Wednesday night and into Thursday. Here's a look at Thursday's map. High pressure across the Gulf of Alaska should sit around 1,028 millibars. This is the high that we've been dealing with most of the week. Another piece of that will sit out across Bristol Bay and north of the Alaska Peninsula, around 1,026 millibars, and a trough of low pressure will pretty much surround the high over the Gulf. With that, we're going to steer any precipitation again across the lower Kuskokwim and the lower Yukon valleys and into the middle Yukon and the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. This should push that moisture just kind of up into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys and into Kotzebue Sound. Most of that should be generally light as well, but there is colder air to the north and west, and if this moves just a little bit more, it could invigorate some of the precipitation chances here across the west. Better option for more interesting weather would come from low pressure across the western Bering. That low's down to about 954 millibars, and that once again will strengthen that southwesterly flow. So places like the Yukon Delta into Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula, and St. Lawrence Island probably need to keep an eye on what's happening here as we go into Friday and Saturday for a little bit more of that southwesterly push, the same thing that we're experiencing right now. For southeast, for south central, generally quiet weather, but don't be surprised to run into a few showers there along that trough of low pressure closer to the Cook Inlet region, especially south of Kenai, toward, let's say, Kodiak Island and west toward Chignik. Let's take a look at temperatures. That's really another big factor of the weather pattern we're in right now. Very mild conditions will continue in southeast. For south central, very close to freezing. The middle and upper Tanana Valley is going to stay warm. Remember, we were talking about rain and snow in some cases there tonight, and that's why. Upper 20s to lower 30s for you. 16 around Arctic Village. Teens for most areas on the Beaufort Seacoast. 20s for the Chukchi Coast all the way into Kotzebue Sound, near 30. Around Unalakleet, and not too far off of that for Nome. St. Lawrence Island in the upper 20s, mid to upper 20s for Bristol Bay and Southwest, and 30s for the Alaska Peninsula to St. Paul at 36. High temperatures for your Wednesday, pretty warm stuff for March. Temps pushing the upper 40s to even 50 degrees around Northway, and mid to upper 50s for Minnie and Southeast, and in some cases 60 around Sitka. 20s and 30s for the North Slope, very mild there. Shishmaref about 34 or 32 in Nome. Southwest temperatures in the lower to mid 40s. In fact, King Salmon and Dillingham could push 50 degrees. Many cases south and west. Temps will be near freezing for Thursday morning. 27 in Nome, 20 for Utqiagvik, 0 in Arctic Village, 25 in Fairbanks, lower 30s for southeast, for south central, and mid to upper 30s for southeast. And again, warm on Thursday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation now. With high pressure sitting across the northern Gulf, we will see some periods of IFR and MVFR, a little bit more widespread across some of the open water there, but the main concerns for changing weather will be that southwesterly flow pushing moisture up the west coast and at times wrapping up over the Alaska Range and into the middle and upper Yukon, and certainly through the Bering Strait and the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seas. As we get into Wednesday afternoon, you'll see IFR kind of hovering underneath that high pressure dome, moving toward Kodiak Island and away from southeastern Alaska. Look for MVFR across parts of the Copper River Basin and the eastern Alaska Range, so things may be changing from impasse to pass, even though you start out on a generally clearer note. Across west and southwest, watch for patchy areas of IFR all the way from the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula and northern Norton Sound, Nome, right through the areas just west of Nunivak Island but east of St. Matthew, and then missing the Pribilovs, and then parts of the central and western chain will at least have marginal conditions through a good chunk of the day, and a lot of that southerly flow is going to push marginal conditions up into the middle Yukon and the Kobuk and Noatak valleys as well. By Thursday morning, you'll see that pushing into the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, IFR all the way through the Bering Strait into parts of the YK Delta, and certainly the Kuskokwim Delta around Bethel, looking for IFR Thursday morning. And then leading the next front across the central and western chain, you'll see conditions starting to go down out there for Adak and Atka included, and still under this high pressure dome, a broad area of IFR through the morning, through Shelikof Strait, either end of Kodiak Island, and then just offshore of southeast. By the afternoon, some of that improves. You'll be looking at lingering IFR around Seward and probably the Kenai Fjords. The eastern end of the Gulf, most of southeast, still looking like VFR will be the rule, and up and down the Alcan, all the way across a good chunk of the North Slope VFR, but the west coast again will still be suffering under IFR conditions from Nome all the way through Hooper Bay, down toward Nunivak Island, and St. Paul and St. George for Thursday afternoon, your flying day. Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass expected to be marginal conditions really most of the day on Wednesday. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we do expect to see some improvement as the day goes on. Rainy Pass will likely start at IFR, but should improve during the day, and we expect similar conditions in windy, but it may not go quite as far over. So look for at least marginal conditions by the afternoon. We'll hope for better, but it looks like marginal will be the rule for Isabel Pass as well after an IFR start. Mentasta Pass should lean over toward marginal conditions as the day goes on. You saw that in the chart there. A VFR start though, so get moving early if you can. Tanita Pass looking like marginal ceilings and viz for your Wednesday afternoon. Portage Pass also sees some improvement as the day goes on. And then Chilkoot and White Pass right now look to be VFR all the way around. Freezing levels show the surface freezing line has been pushed northward up across St. Matthew Island. And as you get into southwestern Alaska, you can see it dives all the way across the Alaska Peninsula and into the northern and eastern Gulf. Freezing levels aloft, though, are super high. Look at this, high pressure sitting right here across the Gulf, and that warmth is allowing levels to come up to 6,000 feet right over Kodiak Island and about 4,000 to 6,000 feet across the eastern parts of the Gulf. So substantial warming all the way around. That continues. Across the Alcan border, levels there around 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Across the west, 5,000 to 7,000 feet with the icing potential there, around isolated moderate from southwestern Alaska down toward Akitan and east of Dutch Harbor on Alaska and the western end of the Alaska Peninsula, and also across the Bering Strait, still a little bit lower there. The jet stream is responsible for these changes, and with high pressure parked right over the northern end of southeast and the Chilkoot and White Pass region, you can see we've got a very large area of stable and warming weather. So the main storm track right now is taking a dive across the Bering Sea and then bumping up across the Yukon Valley, about 110 knots. So it is moving very quickly, but that is shunting all of that cold away from southern parts of Alaska and steering the main weather with any moisture well away from the region. So really not a whole lot to worry about right now as far as that goes. So stable weather goes for most of south central and southeast, and changing weather continues for the west coast and the north slope with those southerly winds about 30 to 40 knots. The north slope looking at winds from 30 to 40 as well. Light winds for southeast blowing offshore and southerlies over a large part of south and southwestern Alaska. Not a big change here at 3,000 feet. You can see strong southerly flow across the chain up to 80 knots in the western chain, 40 knots over the Bering Strait, and westerlies for the north slope at 3,000 feet. And that's where we find our turbulence concerns, generally below 4,000 feet for the Bering Strait, considerable moderate around the western Brooks Range, the Kobuk and Noatak Valleys, the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, and really the interior of the Norton Sound region and northern sections of the Yukon Valley, as well as St. Lawrence Island. And the west will be dealing with increasing areas of turbulence from Adak westward toward Shemya. Watch for a chance for considerable moderate, maybe isolated severe as we get into your Thursday and Friday with a developing low. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me again is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. Thanks again for joining us, Cindy.
Thanks for having me back, Dave.
Sure thing. And I love saying Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska's National Weather Service because that's not weather. Why is the Tsunami Program part of the National Weather Service?
Well, it's because the Weather Service absolutely rocks at warning people for every kind of, devastating natural hazard.
Mm-hmm. The mission of the Weather Service is to protect life and property. And so how does the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, which is a very unique office, again, within the Weather Service, it's not weather, how do those folks help us protect life and property?
The National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer is a national warning center, and we analyze seismic traces 24/7 all around the world. So when there's an earthquake anywhere on the planet, we see it and analyze it within minutes.
Within minutes, and there's actually a goal to have it under, was it 5 minutes?
If there is a tsunami warning to be issued for continental America, yeah, we must get that out, or shoot to get that out in 5 minutes.
Okay. Now that's not something I have ever learned to do, so I know it would be a struggle for me to do that under probably hours, but it is fascinating to watch, and the office is open on a regular basis for tours, right?
Absolutely, come by Friday.
Okay.
Yep, every Friday at 1, 2, and 3 p.m. and they're open public free tours. And it's the most interesting place on the planet. You really should check it out.
Okay, and the office team is made up of people that are earth scientists, not meteorologists or atmospheric scientists. Talk about some of the types of people that work there.
Right, we are out of place in our National Weather Service, but yeah, we are geologists, geophysicists, oceanographers. We even have an astrophysicist on board, computer software architects, electronic technicians that are brilliant and innovative. Our software is all written in-house. Our instrumentation is designed in-house. So it's a really, really unique place, and it's just a couple handfuls of people that work there. So
sure,
yeah.
One of my favorite ways to get a tsunami alert message is on Twitter.
Right.
And I can follow the Twitter address, and we'll put that up on the screen for you there. But it's usually a very quick message that tells you initially what the magnitude of an earthquake could be and about where its epicenter was. What are some of the other ways that you can get that alert message?
Well, Twitter's my favorite too.
Yeah.
And you don't even need a Twitter account to receive it. So
That's
it just comes in like an SMS message. But you can also receive it via email, weather radio, of course, the crawler on your television screen, on the internet, Google Alerts.
Right.
Marine radio if you're out in harbors and boats. Actually, marine radio is probably,
yeah, it is a good one.
That's our partnership with the Coast Guard. We're really grateful for that, absolutely. But there's a variety of ways in dissemination.
Okay.
And locally, excuse me, I'm sorry, but locally in the communities, the sirens will go off as well.
Right. So lots of different ways to get that very important message very quickly when that matters to you. One of the ways that the Warning Center practices with communities is a test on a yearly basis, right?
Right.
How does that work?
Thanks for bringing that up. It's a controversial issue, but it's super important to help us warn better and really serve Alaskans. So the week of March 27th, the commemoration of the 1964 event, for that week we have a Tsunami Preparedness Week every year. We like communities to get out and do drills and practice and do everything we can to raise awareness. And part of that is a live code test where we actually issue the warning message live and we activate the emergency alert system, which means sirens go off, the TV crawler happens, and it's a test, 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 test.
We're
and
doing everything that would normally happen without the real threat of the tsunami, just to
Right.
practice as much as possible.
Right, and this is a major partnership with the State of Alaska, Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the Emergency Operations Center,
Right.
and the Alaska Broadcasters Association. Without the media, we wouldn't be able to do this. So the three groups really work tightly together to do our best to warn, educate the public that this is happening, so they don't wonder and get scared about it. It has been remarkable what we've learned. I mean, it pretty much breaks somewhere every time, but then we fix it, and it gets better. So a quick example is just a few years ago, we used to, when we issued a message, it would activate the entire state.
Right.
Right? I mean, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, everybody would be in tsunami warning. And so now we can regionalize it to where the actual event is taking place.
Right.
That's pretty huge.
Right, right. So identifying points of failure and also points of success, and making sure we continue down that successful path so that folks are warned as quickly and accurately as possible.
Absolutely. And, you know, to get our communities involved to prep themselves, prep their businesses, prep their tourism, prep their schools, you know, just make this an annual thing they need to be doing.
Right. So as citizens wanting to be prepared, we should be prepared to learn more about that test that's happening usually toward the end of March every year.
Right, and you should be happy that it's happening.
Right.
Instead of upset. Definitely be happy that it's happening.
Right. Just as we test tornado sirens in tornado country, we also have to test the tsunami program as well.
Right, because there isn't enough time. You know, for a local tsunami, the wave will arrive in less than 2 minutes. So it's super important that people know what to do.
Very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for helping us know more about the Tsunami Ready program and the test. And the Tsunami Warning Center is a very unique and very important job in the National Weather Service that is just fascinating to me every time I visit the office. So
It's the only one for the continent. You really should come check it out.
it's an international effort.
Yes.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
And thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And onto your sea ice update now. We still see some thin and marginal ice coverage across the western end of Norton Sound and into the eastern end of Norton Sound here, but there is some high concentration ice, though thin, still in the center of Norton Sound there. You can see that there's still some ice showing here on the map. A very late update there into the Alaska Sea Ice Program showed that a lot of this had melted away, so there may be a considerably less there if you're looking out your window saying, where's all that ice on the map? Yeah, it may not be there. Around St. Lawrence Island, there's still some high concentration ice there too, but with persistent south and westerly flow, we expect this edge to continue moving north and east as we go through the rest of the week. Here's a look at southeast. A little breezy in Lynn Canal today, especially around Juneau and then westward toward Gustavus and Cross Sound there. You'll see northerlies in Lynn Canal up to 15 knots and 3-foot seas. Tomorrow northwesterlies a little lighter there across Clarence Strait, 3-foot seas expected. Offshore winds should be generally light, 15 to 20 knots there. Most areas looking at about 7 to 8 feet on Wednesday, and as you get into Thursday, a little bit more of a north and westerly push coming down the outer coast, 20 knots there, 7 to 8 foot seas, and the Lynn Canal still looking at 15 knots and 3-foot seas, and light winds for Stevens Passage all the way down to Clarence Strait with small seas, only 2 feet there on Thursday. For Wednesday, inside of Prince William Sound, northeasterlies 10 knots, looking for about similar conditions are outside of Prince William Sound. Northeasterlies coming down past Kenai Fjords in the Resurrection Bay region, and north and easterly winds coming down to Cook Inlet, speeding up as you get down to the Barrens, 15 to 25 with a 5 to 6 foot sea on either side of the island. That diminishes as we get into Thursday. Look for a south and even a westerly flow wrapping around high pressure sitting out over the Gulf. Things should be pretty quiet. Look for small seas and very light winds just about any direction you travel out on the water on Thursday in South Central. For Shelikof Strait, northerlies 20 knots and 6-foot seas, a little bit of a higher sea between AKwx and Kodiak out in the western Gulf, and then northerlies down the Alaska Peninsula, looking at about 10 to 20 knots there from the north, 9 to 11-foot seas. And you'll notice kind of the winds shifting a little bit more around the Bering Sea coast as that's wrapping around that high pressure ridge, 15 knots or so with a 4-foot sea inside of Bristol Bay, 8-foot seas down the coast. And even that improves as you get into Thursday. Small seas, light winds just about for everyone with high pressure pressure to your east. That gives us a gentle southerly flow into the Alaska Peninsula and over Kodiak Island there for your Thursday. For the Aleutians, we're looking at a little bit more of a steady southerly flow, 15 to 20 for most of the central and eastern chain, 8 to 11 foot seas there, the highest of which will be on the Pacific coast, and then a stronger southerly flow building from AKwx west toward Kiska and Shemya due to a building area of low pressure here across the western Pacific. 30 to 45 knots and 12 foot seas on Wednesday, coming up sharply on Thursday to 25 and 32 foot seas there in the west, 18 foot seas south of Adak and Atka, and 25 to 30 knot winds for most areas in the central and eastern chain. The Pacific coast from Atka west, you'll see those winds coming up anywhere from 30 to 40 knots. And again, a little bit of a different day there Thursday night and into Friday for the western Bering Sea. All of this is driving southerlies moving up the west coast, 25 to 30 knots in all areas, 10 to 11 foot seas from St. Paul to St. George. And south of the ice edge towards St. Matthew, you're looking at about 10 to 14 foot seas on a 25 knot wind, 30 knots coming into St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots over Norton Sound. Winds diminish greatly north of the Yukon Delta into Norton Sound, 10 to 15 knots from the south and southeast. Kind of a variable flow coming inland a little bit on either side of Etolan Strait and Nunivak Island. And then here come those southerlies attached to the low pressure system out in the west. Those will build 25 to 30 knots going into Friday, and 8 to 9 foot seas there expected for Thursday afternoon and evening. For Wednesday across the Beaufort, 20 to 25 with a west and southwest flow, a stronger southerly flow over the Chukchi ice, 40 knots there, 30 to 35 through the Bering Strait region on Wednesday. That diminishes a little bit on Thursday. South and southwesterlies coming up to 20 and 30 knots, and 20 to 25 over the Beaufort Seacoast, all again from the south and southwest, so conditions will be warm. As we look at tonight's weather map, you'll notice a pocket of rain mixed with snow across the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon. That is mainly due to warm air trapped across the eastern interior. There could be some mixed precipitation there. Everywhere up in the north, still under a winter weather advisory and a winter storm warning for areas around the upper Koyukuk Valley, around Ambler. We expect that to greatly improve tonight and into early tomorrow morning, maybe another inch or so. The west coast, you're looking at coastal flood advisories or high surf advisories for areas north from Hooper Bay and Amonuk all the way through Norton Sound, Golovin to Nome, and then around St. Lawrence Island there, perhaps 1 to 2 feet at best, and maybe as much as 4 to 5 feet above that normal high tide line as we go into early Wednesday morning. Conditions should improve greatly after that, but a steady west and southwesterly flow will keep coming your way through Thursday with another Bering Sea low building into the western part of the ocean, 954 millibars there, and trough of low pressure across the western interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.